Good afternoon. We're going to give just a few minutes for people to join and then we will get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to today's Recovery Summit session. This webinar is part of the Recovery Summit series hosted each September by St. Clair County Community Mental Health in recognition of National Recovery Month. A few quick reminders: today's session is being recorded and will be available on the SCCMH YouTube channel. Please use the chat box for any questions or comments. Our presenters will address them as time allows. For those requesting continuing education credits, please be sure to remain on the webinar for the full session and complete the survey that will be emailed to you after. We're honored to be joined today by Elise Nichols and Lauren Krewall from the St. Clair County Health Department. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. So my name's Elise Nichols. I'm the Health Education Manager here at the St. Clair County Health Department.
And I'm Lauren Krewall, one of the health educators at the health department.
And so we just kind of want to get a sense of who's in this virtual room today. So if you could just kind of plug in kind of what your role is. Are you here as a parent? Are you here as a professional, like a counselor at a school, or like a therapist at a CMH, just so we can maybe tailor this a little bit better to you. We can look. And I know from years past we've done it. A lot of people are kind of in the county, in St. Clair County, but we also have people who log in from other areas. So that's helpful to know. Okay, so a lot of professionals, a lot of clinicians, RNs. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, everybody. That's helpful for us to know as we move forward. We can go to the next slide. All right, so our learning objectives today: identify strategies for success when talking with youth about substance use, identify the warning signs for youth substance use, and then describe the importance of lifelong substance use prevention.
So before we really jump into talking about how to talk with youth about substance use, we'll get an idea of the substances that are most commonly used, especially here in St. Clair County. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the data that we'll reference throughout the presentation is coming from what's called the MyFi data for 23-24 school year. So this is the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth survey that's offered by the Michigan Department of Ed and MDHHS for Human Services. So the school districts register for their students to take this survey from 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade. And they're surveyed on a variety of different health behaviors, including substance use. So the surveys are done every other school year. So the cycle for this next cycle will be this coming school year for the 25-26 school year. So if you were in our presentation last year, a lot of this data will look similar because there wasn't a survey done in the 24-25 school year. So this will be the most recent data that we do have before this next cycle is completed and the numbers are updated again. So as of the 23-24 data in St. Clair County, we have these top 4 substances that are used by youth. So For vaping, we have about 13.8% of St. Clair County youth report using, and this is going to be specific to the last 30 days. Cannabis, which is reported as marijuana, and that's the language that we'll use through the presentation, is 11.6% use in the last 30 days, alcohol at 10.7%, and prescription drug use at 5.9% in the last 30 days.
We can go to the next slide. All right, so we're kind of going to zoom in a little bit on these substances specifically. So as Lauren mentioned, the top reported used substance for youth in our county is vaping products. So I just want to give you all a breakdown of what that looks like. So again, that survey 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. So we broke it down in a graph form so we can compare St. Clair County to the national average. So there is not a national comparison for 7th grade, but you can see 6.5% of students are reporting use. In 9th grade, we're pretty comparable to the national average. And then for 11th grade, we are a little bit lower than the national average. But again, it's still our number one used substance for our youth. So something that we're really keeping an eye on when it comes to trends and those surveys per grade, what those numbers look like.
And then moving into marijuana, we can see that for all 3 grades, the use in St. Clair County is higher than those national average uses. So nearly double for 9th graders, looking at 8.9% for St. Clair County compared to that national of 4.6. So it is significantly higher than the use of the national average. And again, something to keep an eye on too, especially considering the legalization in the state of Michigan for folks that are 21 and over, and considering that as we compare, of course, to the national average as well.
All right, we're going to move on the next slide, which covers alcohol. So you can kind of see the breakdown there. 7th grade, we have 2.4% of youth reporting use, much lower than the national average. Again, 9th grade, lower than the national average, but then in 11th grade, we are slightly higher than the national average. And something to keep in mind in terms of like the alcohol landscape, we have more sweet and flavored options on the market now. So like ready to drink cocktails, coolers, seltzers, that's kind of similar in some ways to vapes, right? So there are flavored vapes that can make use more appealing. So the landscape is a little bit different for alcohol than what we've seen in the past with like hard liquor, maybe where it's maybe not as digestible or pleasant to taste. There are more options on the market now.
And then that last of the top 4, again, is the prescription drug use. We have much higher rates here in St. Clair County compared to those of the national. As we can see, the graph, I think, kind of just speaks for itself how different it is. In St. Clair County, it's a bit higher. The unique thing I think about the prescription drugs specifically is that we see this increase from 7th to 9th grade, and then it's going down from 9th to 11th grade. The other 3 are kind of trending up mostly as we go up in grade, but we do see that increase and then decrease again here for the substance use. And of course, seeing that it is that higher, starting a bit higher for 7th and 9th grade kind of just shows that importance of starting that intervention or prevention work much earlier, and really reinforcing that even though it's a prescription, it is for someone that it's prescribed for and by a certain physician. So keeping that in mind, of course, as this graph is really unique to St. Clair County.
And you might wonder, I'm sure you're thinking, oh, they're probably going to present on the top 3 substances used, but we did the top 4 specifically because we wanted to point out that prescription drug use and those kind of differences that we see with our county versus the national. So that's why we did the top 4. just a little caveat there. But the next slide, we're going to talk about trending data. So again, the last couple slides we've talked about point in time. So it kind of tells you where we were at within that 2023, 2024 cycle. This shows you over time how we're doing as a county and specifically with those substances. So here's the good news. There is good news to be had. We are on the decline for several of these substances. Our interventions are working. Whether it be in the schools, whether it be in the households, whether it be presentations that the health department's doing, that CMH is doing, that other organizations are doing, these interventions are working. But of course, there is still work to be done. So I just want to, sometimes it can, when we're working in this space, it can feel like, oh God, we keep going, and there's no progress. And that's kind of the beauty of this survey and doing it regularly, is that we can see progress. Or areas of improvement too. So I just want to point that out, that the work that we're all doing is helping, and we're looking forward to seeing what the next cycle brings as well.
So, of course, as we move through here, we just want to have that reminder, especially for folks that are parents, to just keep in mind that you really are a bigger influence than you think. Like we saw in that last graph, we see that these substances are on that downward trend. We are making an impact there, and it's really important for parents, caregivers, adults, trusted adults. If you have a kiddo in your life, it's important to remember that you do have that strong influence. And then remembering too that the experts agree with this. So knowing that a strong bond helps reduce the chances of engaging in unhealthy behaviors for teens, that parents have a significant influence on their children's decision to experiment with drugs and alcohol, and knowing too that teens say when it comes to substances, their parents are the most important influence. So what we say and what the knowledge that we give to our kiddos is very, very valuable, and they do look for it and they do trust it.
And going off of what Lauren said in this next slide, 76.5% of St. Clair County students had a parent or other adult talk with them about what they expected them to do or not do when it comes to alcohol or other drug use. And as we talked about, when it comes to the research, it's important that those conversations are had. And we're going to talk more as the presentation progresses on what those conversations will look like and strategies. But I wanted to point this number out specifically because in this last cycle, again, 2023 to 2024, we had 76.5% of students say that there was a conversation had, right, with an adult. But in 2022, there was 77.6%, and then in 2020, it was 79%. So what we're seeing is a slight decrease from cycle to cycle of these conversations. I think 76.5% is a strong number, but I think we definitely have the capacity as a county to drive that number up. Absolutely. So we just want to point that out, that these conversations are really important, and that we're also tracking if they're happening or not through this data.
So the big question of having this conversation is, what do you do, right? And knowing that it's not just one conversation, it's not just like a big one and done, the talk kind of thing. It's very important to have multiple ongoing conversations, looking for those blocks of time to have conversations after bed or after dinner, before bed, on the way to school. If you're finding time where it just feels natural, times where there's not going to be a lot of pressure, where you can just kind of be in that space and have that conversation, and making it feel like it's just part of the routine, where you're talking about everything else in life and this is just something else that gets talked about, no big deal. It can be helpful to kind of take that pressure off, knowing that it doesn't have to be like a perfect one-time conversation. It's an ongoing lifetime conversation, especially if we're starting early, to really pave those blocks for having the knowledge and having the comfortability to, be able to stay away from substance use. So We'll talk a little bit more in these next slides about like starting the conversation. So we can go on to the next slide. So like I said, starting the conversation itself can kind of be that challenging point. Building it up to be like this really big thing, but we don't want to make it a special meeting. Having it be more casual, more relaxed, being in a comfortable space will make it more approachable both for the adult and for the child as well. So having these conversations with an open mind, considering how to be curious with your child or with the child about what they're interested in, what they're seeing, what they're taking in the environment around them, whether it's with friends or shows or school, and having having those calm, neutral environments. That way, if the child is willing to share or wants to give some some insight as to maybe how they're feeling about it, they feel comfortable to do so, and they're going to be more receptive to hearing what's going to be said and how that conversation will go. So if we can have folks drop in the chat, maybe if they've had some experience with starting these conversations, or if they have any immediate thoughts on what a good stepping point might be to initiate a conversation related to substance use with a teenager or a youth-aged child.
Drop in the chat so you feel comfortable.
Okay, so we've got, what do you think about substances? Have you seen anyone use at school? That's a good one. Yep. Has anyone asked you to use? A great one. Absolutely. Jumping right in there. Even thinking about, well, we have more coming in.
Oh, Amber, are you seeing any of your friends at school vaping?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or if you see, you're out and about and you see someone with a vape or, whatever other substance, like, hey, what do you think about that? Or, I mean, we see them on the ground a lot, right? So like that can be kind of a double conversation. What do you think about vapes and what do you think about littering, right? Kind of just taking those moments where they're naturally happening, where you're naturally seeing these things come up and asking them, what do you think?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable asking your parents or an adult about substances? Yeah, especially as a clinician, asking a kiddo if they're comfortable talking about it with their adults.
Another comment. I talk about what I learned. My kids are used to me sharing new info. I talk about everything from Minecraft to safety.
Mhm.
Another person said, what have you heard about substances, vapes from friends or other kids? And
Yeah.
and all these things are, I think, great, because then you can start debunking some misinformation too. One thing that I hear a lot specifically is vape, and we'll go into this, but vapes are just water vapor. They are sweet smelling. There's no risk. And as we know, I think as a lot of professionals in the room, is that's not true. But you don't have the opportunity to even debunk that if you don't have the conversation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
move on to the next slide. Oh no, you're good. And so a big part about how to have the conversation, I think, really depends on age. So we'll talk about that on this next slide. And so, of course, we want our information to be age appropriate. And based off the data that we have, again, the data we have through that MyFi survey is 7th, 9th, and 11th grade. We already are seeing use at 7th grade levels. So it's really important to target those specific times, especially before, and have those conversations. But that'll look different, right? Depending on the age of the children and even that child themselves, and the maturity, and even their environment that they're in. So for preschool age children, kind of some standard recommendations: teach them to make good choices on a regular basis, some of these more generalities. Let them make decisions that build confidence. Caution them to never take medication or a drug unless it's given from a parent caregiver, or medical professional. So some of these baseline confidence building, good decision making, critical thinking skills at a young age, more basic. For elementary age children, teach them about the benefits of making healthy choices and the consequences of making unhealthy choices. Teach them about peer pressure and praise their ability to make good decisions. Establish rituals that avoid or that afford uninterrupted conversation, like having a meal together. And so something that Lauren and I were just talking about is sometimes as parents, we can see that we're giving feedback to our students or our clients, and it's don't do this or think about this before you do it, right? And there's a lot of no. So when there is a really great behavior being exhibited, to really call that out and say, wow, what a great job, like what a great decision you made. And I think that can really empower them and make them feel good to keep making those good decisions. So just want to call that out in that bullet point. We can go to the next slide. So for middle school, again, their ability to think more critically is at play. So we can start kind of introducing more complex things at that age. So begin sharing more about the importance of not using substances at a young age. Discuss what they would do if they saw a substance at a party or a get together. Talks about ways to manage stress. Middle school, I think a lot of us, middle school is a difficult time, can be a difficult time. There's, especially as you're in your body, things are changing. Probably your friend group is changing. There can be a lot of stress and pressure there. And as we've seen, like some people may turn to substances or other considered unhealthy ways to deal with that stress. So kind of talking about that early, get to know your child's friends, their dreams, their favorite activities, emphasize the danger of social media. We're going to have a whole slide about that. And then high school age children, continue discussing the risks of substance use, remind them that substance use can jeopardize their future and their dreams. I think that is really important. I know a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you're in high school what the next step is, whether it's a 4-year, college stay, community college, like getting a job, going to the military, doesn't matter what that next step is going to be. Using substances can really impact those next steps in a lot of different ways. So reminding them of that, set limits such as curfews. If you can do that together and have a conversation together, that's really can be a really well done tool or well used tool. Tell your child often that you care about them, that they are important to you, and emphasize the dangers again of social media. The middle school and high school age is a really critical time as well for that social media. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, so then some other tips for having that successful conversation. Of course, keeping it casual, like we've said multiple times here, having that casual conversation more than once is going to be really key for having that be successful and be heard and a child be receptive to. Building that trust as you're having those ongoing conversations, they're reoccurring, they will get easier, they get more natural. It can be one of those things, like I said in the beginning here, where we kind of just like build it up and then it's a lot of pressure. But, as it gets done, it gets easier and easier, and you're able to kind of build that more conversational experience between yourself or the adult and the child. So remembering to ask open-ended questions of them, getting more than that yes or no response will kind of give you more insight on how they're feeling about it, what their perceptions are, what they're thinking about, either what you're saying or what they're thinking about the substances or how they feel about other people using. Of course, using active listening yourself, really hearing what the child is responding to or responding by saying, kind of listening that back to them. I hear that you're saying this. I understand that you feel this, kind of reiterating that back to them to confirm that you are hearing what they're saying. Of course, staying curious, trying to avoid being judgmental, sharing your own experiences. I know someone in the chat had mentioned that they are open about what they had in their life when they were younger. And that can help to bring things up too, especially like in the alcohol landscape, like we talked about. It's a lot different now than it was even 5 or 10 years ago, right? So these things didn't exist when I was a kid. What do you think about it? Vapes were not a thing when I was a kid. You know, it was XYZ, which are also maybe not good, right? So sharing how you've had your own experiences, again, whether they're good or bad, resisting that urge to lecture, and then being mindful, of course, of any family history that you have or that the family has related to substances and use, any substance use disorders. And then, as we kind of talked about with having these conversations at all ages, is to really give honest and age-appropriate answers, even if the answer maybe isn't like you just don't know the answer to a question. Being honest about that and saying like, hey, I don't know, but I'll look it up or I'll look more into it and then we can talk about it when I have an answer. Or rather than having it be a, you know, I'll tell you more when you get older, still giving an age appropriate response to some of those maybe more challenging questions, which a lot of times is easier said than done. But you know, kind of just those gold standard tips, right? This is easier said than done sometimes.
And the more you do it, hopefully the easier it gets. So this is one of my favorite slides that we have in this presentation. So teaching refusal skills to that student or the child, they could, again, if they're being approached to use substances, they can give a reason of why they're refusing. They can be honest, be firm, use their body language. You can see in the photo, we kind of have like the stop hand. Suggest another activity, be prepared to say no again. And so something that we have talked with students about and different folks who are in the substance use field is, you know, obviously every child is different, but if they have in their mind kind of a reason or an out, it can make things a little bit easier if they're offered a substance at a party, at a get-together. So if they have in their head, and you guys have already kind of talked about it, they can say, you know, well, my mom said that I'm off the basketball team if I do this, so I'm not going to do it, right? And they have it in their back pocket, it's in the back of their head, but it can be hard when you don't have something lined up. And you haven't thought about it. It can be a little bit harder if you feel some pressure from friends or from other people in your life to engage. So having some of those scenarios in the back pocket. I know in past presentations, it's been like sports, you know, the sports could be impacted for me. It could be video games could be taken away from me. Just different things in their life that are important to them may be at risk. So they're going to choose not to do that. And they likely need to be prepared to say no again, because depending on the people approaching, they may be a bit persistent. So standing firm, and that can be hard when you're a kid, but standing firm and letting folks know around you, no, I'm not going to do this. And of course, if you have that relationship with the child, it'd be wonderful if they can come back and tell a trusted adult like that about that interaction. But if they kind of feel empowered enough to handle it too, because you never know what situation they're going to be in, to handle it is really key.
So there, of course, are other things that we can do for prevention. So outside of that ongoing conversation, and we'll jump into those a little bit here in the next slide. Thank you. So A big one, especially going back to all of that data related to prescription drugs, keeping track of the prescription drugs and not just knowing what is in the cabinet or knowing what's available, but keeping it in a safe place. Having it in, especially with little kids, having it somewhere that's up high, not accessible, maybe a locked box. Those are really handy to have. And having them in a location that maybe is not as always known, right? Especially for those prescription drugs specifically that shouldn't be used by anyone, of course, then it's prescribed to. Offering support and encouragement, of course, especially with teens, like we talked about, with middle schoolers, with high schoolers, being able to give as much support and encouragement as you can, really reinforcing any kind of positive behavior. If you do have experiences where a kiddo is coming back and saying, you know, hey, my friend did offer me a vape, and this is what I said. Offer praise for that, because we want to really show them that these are valuable things that they are learning, and of course any kind of good behavior is going to be valuable too. As a trusted adult or a parent, setting a good example, you know, we as adults make adult choices, whether that's related to alcohol or you know, nicotine products. If there is a kiddo that asks, you know, hey, you're drinking a beer, right? That's an adult choice that, you know, that is made that doesn't impact an adult the same way that it impacts a child. But still having, as best you can, those setting a good example that way for even just healthy coping, whether it comes to stress or you know, anxiety, different types of things like that. Showing them how to deal with those emotions too is a good way to set that example as well. Of course, staying involved in their life, being interested in their hopes, their dreams, and encouraging them to pursue those. That can be a way of prevention if they are really on track with something that they are passionate about. Can help as prevention with substance use. Prioritizing their overall health, even as a family, you know, keeping up with regular dentist appointments, doctor's appointments, having a variety of different foods, eating, you know, eating as a family together, prioritizing that health in general will remind them to take care of their bodies and limit substance use. And then, of course, even just as an adult, staying informed, as clinicians, staying informed about the trends that are happening, the data that we've talked about. As a parent, staying informed about, you know, what's going on in your child's life, and being ready to kind of jump in when and if you need to with any of these questions or concerns that a kiddo might have.
And I'll just kind of jump in here because Lauren and I do a lot of outreach. So we're out in the field a lot, interacting with kids in our community. And something that has come up multiple times is, you know, we're educating on a substance, and the student or the kid might say, well, my mom vapes, or my, you know, or whatever, name your substance. And I think that's a great opportunity. I mean, we're not here to judge on what the adult is doing and what choices they make. But I think from an adult perspective and a parent perspective, we have gotten that conversation. Like, I'm really trying, I want to set a good example for my child. And, you know, I know that what I'm doing could impact them, and I don't want to set this example. I think having that conversation and letting them know, you know, I really wish I didn't use nicotine. I really wish I didn't use traditional cigarettes. I really wish I didn't vape. And a lot of times the data bears out that they started at a young age. And, you know, it's addictive, right? And so having that conversation with the child, like, I really don't want that path for you, is, I think, really powerful, because, you know, some people use substances, that is just a fact. And but being kind of open and honest with that use with your child and having that conversation can be really powerful, which moves us into the social media portion of the presentation. So just some tips: follow the accounts that your teens follow, create a family media plan, discuss critical thinking and media literacy. I think this is probably one of the more important things just in our culture today is that critical thinking piece and be able to identify like the reliable sources and what's true and untrue. And, you know, a lot of these substance use companies are targeting youth. And so you'll see ads targeting youth on social media, trying to get them to use their products. And they might use cartoons, they might use fun colors, and you know, letting your teen know they are doing this for a reason. They want you to start using young so that they'll have, you know, somebody who's using their product for years and years. And I don't want that for you, right? Limit screen time or use parental controls, limit the number or types of accounts they are allowed to have.
So now some factors that may contribute to substance use. Of course, this is not exhaustive or fully inclusive, right? But some things that can contribute, of course, a family history of substance use, having a mental or behavioral health condition, having impulsive or risk-taking behavior activity, a history of traumatic events, of course, and low self-esteem or feelings of rejection, kind of going back to like we talked about with a lot of the middle school and high school aged kids, having those feelings, kind of feeling a bit lost, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to from those years. So really recognizing any of those risk factors, and then kind of like we've already talked about with some of the conversations and prevention strategies, keeping those in your back pocket, maybe knowing that they're that they might be there, and how can you tailor a conversation to maybe tie that in and address that as well, or have it be something that you face forward to, right? Like you know, if it is something that comes up like ADHD, right? We don't take other people's medications, even if we're, you know, if we have something diagnosed, we don't take anyone else's medications, no one else's prescriptions. We have our own, you know, care plan or whatever it might be. So really using these risk factors to tailor how the conversations go and what kind of education that's given as well is important.
All right, tips for identifying use, and just a little disclaimer. I think, not only I think, but you know, it kind of bears out, especially the professionals here on the call and even parents who may have multiple kids. Every student and kid is different. So some of these signs may look a little bit different child to child, but we're going to give some kind of standards, things to look for you. So if you want to go to the next slide. Signs of substance use. So it could be mood and personality changes. So sullen, withdrawn, or depressed, less motivated, silent, uncommunicative, hostile, angry, and uncooperative, maybe more deceitful or secretive, kind of going up. I mean, again, a teenager, they might be going up into their room and shutting the door, and that's probably going to be a common occurrence. But, you know, something a little bit more where they're going in the bathroom a lot and having the door shut and locked and in there for a while could be a little bit different than the norm, and something that could raise some flags. Unable to focus, a sudden loss of inhibitions, hyperactive, or unusually elated. So depending on the substances, right, potentially that they're using, it could kind of be a depressant, or it could kind of be an upper, as what some people in the drug community, you know, refer to that as. So they might have like a lot of energy and kind of be hopping around. So it could just really depend on the substance. And again, the child and how their body's interacting that substance on some signs of substance use.
And then next we'll go over to some other behavioral signs, again, considering how they may be different from the normal. So ending friendships, relationships, having more struggles with relationships within the family, skipping school, locking doors, breaking curfews, being more secretive, especially if they have a phone, right? Having, you know, hiding it away when someone walks by, keeping, you know, if they didn't keep a lock on it before, keeping a lock on it now, using more over-the-counter medications or products to counteract any kind of symptom, I suppose, from a substance, whether that's eye drops or nasal sprays. I see someone said many kids are having burner phones, so that could be something to keep a lookout on too. Having big energy swings, using gum, mints, things like that, again, to kind of cover up maybe like a breath if they're smoking, or have something that would be changing the smell of their mouth.
Mhm. So if we go to the next slide, signs of substance use, hygiene, and appearance. So again, smell of smoke or any other unusual smells on the breath or clothes. So again, it's not just traditional. When we think of smoke, I think a lot of us think of traditional cigarettes, but even that sweet smell of a vape in the different flavors could be an indicator. Messier than usual appearance, poor hygiene, frequently red or flushed cheeks or face, burn or soot on fingers or lips. So if it's a combustible substance that they're using, you could see that on their fingertips or lips, track marks on arms or legs if they're injecting drugs. And you can also find track marks on other parts of the body, but typically the first place is the arms. And then wearing like long clothing as well, and then also worn outlines in clothing. So you can see in that picture there, one thing that we have seen a really kind of upsurge of is that Zyn. It almost looks like an icebreaker, like kind of circular thing. So icebreakers are gum, but a lot of people, you can see that outline in their back pocket. So something to look for as well, especially if you're doing laundry or something like that.
And then our last set of signs of substance use are related to physical health. Of course, having that frequent sickness, just being generally ill or under the weather, being really tired, lethargic, slurred speech. That could be while under the influence. If they're having a lot of nosebleeds that are unusual, sores around the mouth, in the mouth, any kind of sudden weight changes, whether it's a loss or a gain, is going to be indicative. Again, kind of like we've said before, maybe not of substance use specifically, but these are signs that could align with substance use as well. So any kind of weight changes, having bruises that are kind of inexplicable, a lot of perspiration, and then of course if it's a bit more involved in ongoing, even seizures, vomiting, that stuff that's a bit harder to hide too. So like I said, all of these signs to say they may not be specifically indicative of a substance use with a specific child, but they're at the very least a reason to have a conversation and to notice if something is outside of the normal, have that conversation and see what's going on, knowing that it could be a sign of substance use.
Yeah. So the next slide, we got a lot of feedback on this in years past, so I wanted to share again. It's a couple years old at this point, so we're anxiously awaiting the Drug Enforcement Administration to DEA to update. But we talked a lot about social media, texting, burner phones, and so emojis are kind of a big component of that. And so these are some common emojis used for specific types of drugs. So you can kind of see here the outline. Laura and I were talking not too long ago. It's interesting because we're right here on the border of Canada in St. Clair County. So that maple leaf is a universal sign for drugs in a cookie, large batch. Cocaine, I think, is a little bit more self-explanatory. Snow, it's called a lot in other, on the street and other circumstances. So that's the emoji that coincides with that, and even the 8-ball. And you can see at the bottom the mushroom. Cough syrup is the grape or the Purple Heart, different things like that. So these are some of the more common emojis that you might want to be on the lookout for. Again, I think seeing multiple signs could help inform your conversation with your students. So if you're seeing maybe some physical signs, some behavioral signs. And if you do see something like this on the phone, it could kind of add up in some different ways. And if nothing else, like Lauren said, worth a conversation.
Okay, so we have a little activity now. This is a photo of a drawer, and there are 12 hidden nicotine products in this drawer. So if you see one, how about we have you drop it in the chat if you can spot one where you see it, and then we'll give a couple minutes for you to kind of take a look, and then we'll point them out and talk about them a little bit more.
Yeah, so just drop in the chat. And this is actually another health educator in a different health department. These were confiscated vapes from a school. So common things that might be in the hands of our youth. So we have a lot. Okay.
Yeah, you guys are quick.
I would say you all have probably
Okay.
seen a few things. So let's go to the next slide.
Okay, so this one has everything circled as it sits there, so you can kind of see it hidden in the shadows by the little rubber unicorn ducky. That one was not super easy to see, but a lot of people got the Zyn that's under the unicorn ducky. If we go to the next slide, we'll kind of take a more blown out look of each of the products. So we have, and I think right now too, especially like the Mr. Vapors, the Breezes, those are pretty popular as far as vapes go. These couple in the middle, they look more like the modular ones where you would be, dropping the e-liquid or the e-juice, e-vape into it with that reusable component rather than the disposable. And then, of course, the Zyns, those nicotine pouches that, like Elise said, have become pretty popular, especially because they are the pouch. It's not like a lot of those more traditional chewing tobacco where it's the like shredded tobacco.
And that can be hard to yeah, this slide's great. We can stay on that slide, but it can be hard to kind of identify, right? If that's just in someone's drawer, it can be hard to spot. So that's why we're kind of calling it out and showing it. So some products to look for in terms of nicotine, like we had talked about before, the Breezies are pretty popular, the Zyn, and we just wanted to kind of show some of the brands and what the bottles look like, again, for you all to see. Next slide. So again, some products to look for in terms of cannabis. So these are some on the market products for cannabis use. Bongs come in all shapes and sizes. And then there are vape devices specifically for cannabis as well, and other products that allow for concealed smoking similar to that of a pipe or a bowl. So we have those kind of examples laid out here in the slide as well. Next slide. This is also me. Okay. And then in plain sight, and as someone talked about like a burner phone, youth may always not be forthcoming about substance use, and you may try to hide things. And there are more products than ever available on the market, especially online, to hide things. And it may not be marketed as, a device where you can hide your marijuana if you're underage, but it's something you can hide things in. And oftentimes I've seen online, they'll say it's a place for you to hide money, but drugs can also be something you can hide in these things as well. So this is like an Apple Watch that kind of comes apart. And then we also have these look like pens, kind of opening up that Coca-Cola to put things in, and then even a wall outlet. So they're all different types of items that can be used to conceal substances and to kind of put them in or to be able to use them with.
So then some more common places that things might be hidden. Of course, we have our typical inside drawers underneath a sweater. We have the stereotypical under a loose floorboard, right? But there's lots of other places that things in general can kind of be hidden in that more plain sight, whether it's a bedroom, a bathroom, even in a car, if we have a kiddo that's driving or has access to a vehicle. So thinking about all of those different options, especially if we do have, or if there's suspicion, right, of any kind of use. So knowing that it could be, even if they don't have one of those, fancy little outlet adapters, right? Like those outlets come right off and go back on. So something can be slipped in there, in things that are like containers that are empty, like a pencil case, a case for earbuds, empty wrappers, making it kind of just look like trash, especially in the car if they've just got some empty fast food bags, just kind of hiding something in there, up and along a sunroof cover. And then even in places like standard over-the-counter medication bottles, or in plants, the list goes on and on, right? As creative as I can be, a teenager can be too, right? So kind of just keeping in mind that there are lots of places to hide things, especially if they're small items like we looked at with the vapes. It can be easy to kind of just tuck them away and have them go unnoticed.
All right, so I'm just going to give you just 30 seconds. We're going to do a scenario. You find a disposable vape pen in your teenager's coat pocket when you are doing laundry. How do you react or handle the situation? So we talked a lot about prevention and having conversations, and hopefully, those things play out so a student doesn't use, but, there may be a point where we find something. How do we handle that? So if you want to drop in the chat some responses, some strategies, or even if you're like in a professional setting, you're a therapist, you work at CMH, you're a school counselor, you see that, a teenager has that. I'm sure some policies might say you have to confiscate it, but I'm sure there's a conversation that's going to be had as well. So what would that look like? Be curious about it. I would ask what they thought about it calmly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It can be hard when you find something, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of disappointment there, whether you're a professional or a parent, a lot of disappointment there. There may be anger. I would calm down first prior to talking to teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yep.
Exactly. It can be difficult to receive information when tensions are high, whether it be from the parent, the professional, or the student. So trying to take a deep breath. Maybe it's taking a little time before you address it right away. Don't immediately get angry. I'm just looking through some of these. Determine how much they are using, when, stay calm, but let them know this is against your boundaries, rules for them. I would talk to my kid without younger kid around, remove the audience and start asking. That's a wonderful kind of caveat.
Mm-hmm.
And start asking open-ended questions. I've remained neutral in my expression and tone. Or let my son know that I found a vape in his pocket and will confiscate it. Or also sit down and talk to my son about it. Or if you do, take a time out before addressing it. Yeah, all of these are perfect. I'm sure all of us, even in our personal lives or professional lives, have had interactions that have been heated. And like I said, you're probably not processing that information, especially as a student. And so if you can kind of come at that conversation in a more calm manner from both parties, or if there's multiple parties involved, I think that could be a more fruitful situation. Because I think ultimately the reason why we as a professional or guardian might be upset is because we care about that student. We deeply care and we want the best for them. And I think delivering that message, could be more powerful than I'm so angry, I'm going to take this away from you, you're grounded. I mean, that might be a component to it. But again, I really care about you and I don't want you to do this. And there are going to be repercussions. There might be boundaries that are set and curfews and different things that result from that. But it's ultimately because I care about you, and making sure that that message is paramount when you kind of implement those things. So let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so we kind of hit the nail right on the head. Everyone's responses for sure,
Yeah.
remaining calm. I mean, of course, remembering that it's totally valid to be angry, like Elise was saying, but making sure that you're in a place when you're approaching that conversation and finding that time where you feel calm, making sure that it's a time too, if, depending on what the substance is, where the child is not under the influence. Because of course, if that's the case, if you try to approach it and they are actively under the influence, the conversation isn't going to be heard the same way as if they're in a more sober state of mind. So having that where you're kind of piecing together when it's going to be approached can be really, really helpful. Like everyone talked about, being calm and curious, asking those open-ended questions, asking how long, for, asking maybe why, how it makes them feel, when did they start, why did they start, being more curious, right, than being, fully accusatory. And I think that probably goes especially if you don't maybe have hard evidence, right? If you have a vape and you found it in their pocket, you know exactly what it is, but maybe if it's more a suspicion, but you don't have anything on hand, that suspicion, we don't want to be accusatory too. And then, of course, knowing that they may react always. There may be denial, there may be anger, there may be, they may be embarrassed. It may be a really emotional experience for them too. So being prepared for that and knowing that depending on their response, it may have to be a conversation that gets revisited again, right? If things get too heated or they get too emotional, it's okay to say, like, listen, these are our consequences for right now. We're going to come back to this and have a conversation later when we're both in a place where it's going to be productive. And that's okay to do too. And then also remembering that you can absolutely challenge those perceptions of norms, knowing the data and knowing these numbers that most kids are, especially when we talk about vapes, right? Most kids are not vaping. 86.2% of St. Clair County High School students are not using vapes. 93.5% of middle school students are not using vapes. So it is not the more common thing to do. It's not what everyone's doing, right? We hear that a lot, like everyone's doing it. It's not. That is not the norm, and it is not most kids. So that is something to keep in mind, even just for yourself as an adult too. It's not most kids.
We call out vapes here, but as we showed in the data at the very beginning, vaping was the most used, and even so, you have 86.2% of high schoolers who do not use. So the data is similar when it comes to alcohol and other use. A clear majority are not using. So I want to be mindful of time. We'll get through these last couple slides and hopefully we'll have a minute for questions. So I just want to share some resources. My Life, My Quit. It's through MDHHS, and we just in the National Jewish Health Service. So we wanted to include that. It's specifically for youth under 18, and there's a texting option. So in the past, it was always like a call-in. There was a lot of call-in type things, and we know that kids don't always love a text or love a call. They love a text. So that's a great resource. This is Quitting. Again, a text option. SAMHSA. A national organization, a national kind of government entity. They have a helpline and a text line that serves all and can help provide referrals to like local centers. Again, all this information is on the slide and you can watch it back. And then DEA also has a Growing Up Drug-Free guide as well that can be helpful for folks. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
And then, of course, local resources. Here at the health department, we have our teen health location on Court Street in Port Huron, and then our primary location downtown. We have all kinds of services for adults and for youth, and for folks needing harm reduction programs as well. And then, of course, we have the Region 10 Access Line and St. Clair County Community Mental Health, who are both great partners for substance use and especially for teens.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, we have a community health improvement plan. We call it the CHIP for short. And so every 5 years, we do this big data collection across the county. And then we talk to the community and say, what are our priorities in terms of health that we need to focus on? And so we're in a plan, a 5-year plan until 2027. And the 3 priority areas are substance use, mental health, and obesity and associated behaviors. So we are looking closely at these numbers, and it's a community collaborative. We're all working towards these things. It kind of helps us all unite, see the same data, and kind of work together to move the needle on this. So that's something I just want to include in there. There's a lot of partners aside from just the health department, aside from CMH Region 10, who are working towards this goal in other ways as well. So we have like 1 minute if anybody has any questions. If not, we can talk later. This is our contact info for Lauren and I. Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you.
It's nice to see some familiar names and agencies on here too locally.
Anything there?
I was just waiting to see if there was any questions, but looks like we're
You know that?
So I see one question. I'll see. Do you have crossover stats for the 4 areas? What do you mean by crossover stats? But if not, we have a data team here. If we can't get that right away, we have a data manager here who can run all the data and can kind of manipulate the data to get answers to different questions that we have.
Is it maybe use of multiple substances?
Maybe someone who is using, more than one. Okay. So in that survey, the MiFi survey we talked about, yeah, there are like hundreds of questions that they ask, honestly. So I don't have the data in front of me, but if you want to connect and email me after the fact, I can get with our data manager and we can see what that breakdown looks like and look exactly of how it's asked on the survey and kind of compare with what this, because we have 5, at least at the last cycle, we had 5 school districts participate in that. So we can pull from that.
And most of the questions are broken down by substance.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Christy.
all right. Thank you both so much for being with us today and sharing your information. It was a lot of really good information. I want to thank everyone who joined the session today. We hope the information was valuable and useful. Today's presentation is just one of many webinars being offered throughout September as part of our Recovery Summit. For details and registration for upcoming sessions, please visit our website at www.sccmh.org under the Events tab. Also, please keep an eye out for a short survey in your email. Your input is vital in helping us continue to improve and shape future events. For those requesting McBath and peer certificates, they will be emailed out in mid-October. If you're requesting social work CEs, your certificate will be emailed to you after payment is received, if applicable. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time, and thank you both.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.